Good talk, but so we're gonna do this thing about the Raan and the Alter Rebbe of Chabad. So just to quickly summarize what we were talking about in the Alter Rebbe and the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch is this concept of when you have a relationship, the Torah creates a relationship with you and your chametz after the midday of the 14th of Nisan. So much so that you can't get rid of it by putting it on the street. It's still yours. And we gave a little bit of a psychological analysis of when you have a relationship with the Yetzer Hara, and you can't just say, "Oh, Yetzer Hara, have a good day," because you entered into a partnership, and now it's like you signed up to do something with the mob. Became what is it called again? A made man. A made man doesn't just mean you're protected; it also means you are on the hook to follow and give your life for that whatever code is. So you make this deal with the Yetzer Hara. You can't just say, "Oh, well, have a nice day. I'm not interested anymore." And that's that. So we're learning about that. Okay. Now we're going to learn today a number of things. And again, it's going to be the Raan and the Alter Rebbe of Chabad from the Shulchan Aruch Harav. The point is going to be to see a derech halimud, to see a way where we basically take svaros from the Gemara and the Rishonim, and we apply them to halacha. That's one thing. The second thing we're going to do is we're going to also apply the derech ishbitz. You're not getting this share anywhere else. Where we're going to take a look at how we can analyze certain minhagim and halachas and internalize what the Ishbitzer Rebbe would say about them or something related to that. And yeah, either what he does say or what I think, or you could think that he would say. And that's like another derech of learning. Why am I putting them together? They're really separate. They don't have to be put together. I think the answer is that once you start learning certain way, whether it's like a brisk or Lomdus that we're suggesting is an alternate to brisk, the Raan and the Alter Rebbe Chabad exemplifying this type of Lomdus, it opens up the sugya to just like it opens it up to svara, to logic and analysis and underlying reasons. It also opens it up to asking a question of like, how will this fulfill a particular tachlis in me, a particular goal in me? So I'll give you some. We'll see that. We're going to learn more inside today. Okay. So the first thing is we're going to learn a little bit about the idea of a gzeira of the rabbis, particularly a gzeira of why we're so strict on Pesach, to check so thoroughly for Pesach, when we already know that habaydik tzarich sheyivatel, that when you, even though you're gonna look for the chametz and destroy the chametz, you still need to do bittul. So once you do bittul, Deorayta, the chametz isn't yours. Because if you do bittul in the proper time, before this mana isser arrives, before the time of the prohibition arrives, so again, you've removed yourself from the chametz. The chametz is no longer yours, and the Torah says the chametz has to be lo yeralecha chametz. Don't see your chametz. If it's not yours, it can be there. It's not about having chametz existence; it's about you not having chametz. So, what is it that the rabbis did? They did the following in Taf Lamed Aleph, Halacha Gimel. They say the following. Take a look at this. In page Yud. You can grab one over there. Aval. Oh, here. Aval. You see Halacha Gimel, page Yud. Aval Chachamim Gazir she'ein bittul behefker mayokum l'chametz av kedem she'giz man iser hanasai. The rabbis decreed that nullifying or being mevatel the chametz doesn't help even before the time of the prohibition of prohibiting its benefit comes. You have to look for it in its hidden places. If you've used those places during the course of the year, to search for it, to remove it from all of your boundaries, meaning from your where you live and beyond, where you reside and own. And do as the laws required. Okay. Now, later, the Alter Rebbe is going to say it in even stronger words and say the following: that it's not just that they require you to go and search, but that if you didn't search, you would be rabbinically over on Bal Yirav Bal Yamatzah. Meaning, we all know there's a lav, two lavin, of possessing chametz. But if you are mevatel it, you're not over the lav. Comes the Alter Rebbe and says, you are over the lav rabbinically. Which means that you could say there's two types of gzeros. You could apply the same thing to Shabbos, for example. You could say when you do something that the rabbis didn't allow you to do on Shabbos, for example, muksa on Shabbos. So you're over a takana, you're over a institution or gzer that the rabbis enacted. But then you could say there's a higher level of an isser where it's this thing, even though it's not an av malacha, it's not a told of av malacha, it's a shvus that's ke'ein a malacha. I don't remember the exact term; it's eluding me now. Where you could arguably say the first thing, the person's a Shomer Shabbos. Now we always think of Shomer Shabbos, right? Shomer Shabbos we usually think of as either you're over an Isser Shabbos Deorayta or you're not. But you could arguably say that if the person is over a rabbinic lo saseh, whatever that category would be, how Shomer Shabbos are they? But again, that might be a little bit harsh. But the point being that there's a distinction between something that the rabbi said not to do, and when the rabbi said we're considering this as like ke'ena malacha, even though it's not an actual malacha, but rabbinically we're going to treat it like a malacha. That's a much higher threshold. What I'm saying in English is we're not just saying you should check for the chametz. We're saying if you didn't check, if you still have chametz, you're over on bal yirah bal yimatza, even though it's not your chametz because you did the bittul. Are you over midaraisa? No, but the rabbis make that you are over a rabbinic bal yirah bal yimatza. And you could say, well, what's the difference between one rabbinic and the other rabbinic? It's all rabbinic, so whatever they call it. But language is important. That using that language, it has halachic significance. Okay, so and now let's go a little further, and I'll say a little bit of ishbitz on this. In general, when the rabbis say something, what are they trying to forbid?
I put a gate around it.
Okay, so they're trying to make a gate around it. But you could say even in the gate, there's a gate where we're putting a gate because we don't think it's a good idea for you to come here, or we're putting a gate because if you come here, you're going to get electrocuted. Meaning, lahavdil, there are gates and there are gates. They're not all the same gates. Now, you don't need the Ishbitzer to tell you, but the one of the chilukim between a rabbinic decree and the Torah law is that you don't make a rabbinic decree on another rabbinic decree. The Ishbitzer explains what the logic is behind that. He says, when the rabbis make a decree, they have to say, this is a rabbinic decree. This isn't what the Torah itself requires. We made this decree. Why? And by doing that, you're not over Bal Tosef. You're not violating the prohibition of adding on the Torah. Okay, very nice. It's like a technicality, but it's actually more than a technicality. If you treat them exactly equal, what you're doing is the fence is there to protect whatever the safeguard is for. If you're safeguarding the safeguard, you're saying that the safeguard itself is intrinsic. But it isn't. It's only there as a safeguard. So that's why we say that we don't make a decree to protect another decree. That's still, again, not even, you don't even need Ishbitz yet. And then finally the Ishbitz will say, here's the difference. When the Torah says something, that's the way it is. When the rabbis say something, especially if they say the reason, there will come a time when there will be a basin that could be greater than them in numbers, greater than them in wisdom, and they have to, especially if there's a reason given. But even if there's not a reason given, but especially if there's a reason given, they'll analyze the situation and they'll say, well, look, this is a decree because of this and this thing, and it doesn't apply anymore, and we're gonna remove the decree. It's not so common that we do that, but in theory, it's common. It's the recourse is there. Why? Because again, what it really is, this is Ishbitz, is think of yourself. Torah allows you to do certain things, but you can't do them because you know yourself. You know you can't control yourself if you do this thing. So the Torah says don't do it. So many things where you cross a line in the sand. You didn't do anything wrong, but you yourself know by crossing that line of the sand, you will do something inappropriate. You will do something that's wrong. So that's self-control, is not to say hello to the Yetzer Hara. You're just saying hello. You're just being polite. That's exactly what the rabbis are saying. The rabbis are doing for the klal what you have to do to the prat, to yourself. Okay. Anyway, that's a little bit of Ishbitz. Let's continue with the Alter Rebbe. Back to the Alter Rebbe now. Now, the second thing is, why aren't the rabbis happy with bittul? Why can't they just say you did the bittul? You don't really have to check. You want to check, go knock yourself out. But it's not like you're going to be over by your Derabbanan. It's just whatever. Check, don't check. So the Raan gives two reasons, and the Alter Rebbe likes both reasons, but we're going to see if whether both reasons are in fact equal. So I'm going to read it to you in the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, and he says the following thing. Halacha Daled. What? I don't know. He'll be back. Halacha Daled. There are two reasons for this. The first reason is because nullifying is dependent on your thoughts. That you will in fact give it away emotionally, mentally, make it ownerless with a whole heart. You'll really mean it. But let's remember, what were Jews doing then? They were getting into liquor business. So that's their livelihood, $10,000, $50,000 worth of grain alcohol. And they're really going to mean that it's hefker? No, they're really going to mean that when Pesach is over, I'm going to sell it again. I'm going to make a living off it again. It's very hard to really trust that people really mean what they say they mean in their heart. But you see, I believe in Ligamri, to really say it's like it's not mine. To really feel that it's totally not connected to you. If you say that's people's minds are not equal. Whatever. Could be somebody who's going to make up a leniency in his head. He's not really going to make it ownerless with a real intention as such. Like you said, therefore the rabbis decreed that the bittul hefker doesn't help at all. Now this is a very.
So you're saying that the selling of the chametz is a true language bullshit? What are you saying?
He's not even talking about selling the chametz. He's talking about the selling of the chametz is a few hundred years old. It was kind of new in his time.
You're saying here,
he's talking about just the bittul. Well, the Gemara talks about bittul. So you have $100,000 alcohol, grain alcohol stuff. You really mean it? That you're mafka? We're not talking about selling. Selling is something else. We'll get to that. He will deal with that eventually. Not exactly, because a sale is a sale. You know, like when I sell something, it's sold. There may be some question of whether somebody means it or not, but in this case, because of that, because that's the nature of a decree. We're saying we have a consideration or a concern that not everybody is going, like hefker is a theoretical thing, but it's not based on what Judaism usually thinks of conformity, which is action. Here it's not action, it's a feeling. We don't really know what people are feeling. We have no way of verifying what the relationship with their chametz is in their heart, if they really were mevatel it or not. So, okay. Well, it's up to them, and there's no way to x-ray their heart and know. And therefore, we're going to act in the best interest of the kahal and say, to be safe, we're not going to rely on that. And
what does it mean to be hefker? Basically, you're saying that it's not mine, but no one knows. No one else knows.
Yeah, it's allowed to be in your house. It's allowed to be in your house. It's sitting in your liquor cabinet. Who's coming into your house? Who has a key to your house is locked. So that's why it's very suspicious that maybe you don't really mean it.
No, you could mean it because no one's thinking it anyway. So what do you have to lose by?
Well, exactly your point. You don't know.
This is worth $1 million. I make this heft. Well,
in theory, anybody could come. A guy can come. A guy who's listening to the YouTube video, and will say to a Jew who didn't sell his chametz, but I heard you were mafia your chametz. Is that true? He said, yeah. Okay, I'm going to take it. Okay, go ahead. The only reason why they can't do that, in theory, they could. No, well, then it's not hefker. If you can't come in and take it, what is the hefker? Is a meaningless thing. You have to really
put it out on the street.
No, you don't. But that's part of the chiddush that the Raan explains as well. Now, the Rebbe explains as well that really, normally, hefker needs it to be accessible to everyone. Has to be announced before other people. According to one opinion of the Gemara, it's not enough that you said it's hefker. Somebody else has to take it from you for that hefker to. It's a two-way street. Why don't we need those things here? Because it's only yours because the Torah makes it yours. And the same way, like they make it yours, even when you don't want it, you could also not want it before this Mana Isser, and it won't be yours when this Mana Isser is come. But why are we making this Chumrah? Because we don't trust people. Here's a good reason not to trust people, and that would explain why he says doesn't help at all. Because if you're going to say, well, it helps a little bit, then you'll say, okay, so it helps a little bit. So maybe I shouldn't have chametz that I know 100%, but I don't have to check for chametz that I don't know 100%. No, it doesn't help at all. I have to pretend that the chametz is mine and do the proper bittul. Do the proper bedikah and beer. Now, habez, the second reason is lefi, come join us. Sha'adam raga b'chol hashana b'chametz. This is the main reason we're going to say is that a person is accustomed a whole year to have chametz. It's not usher the rest of the year. Yeah, find page Yud for everyone who just came in. Because you're so accustomed to it, you're used to chametz. It's nothing wrong with chametz the whole year. So because you're so close to it, it's so normal, it's so okay, we're afraid you're going to forget. And therefore, if it's going to be around, you're going to come to eat it. Therefore, the rabbi said, Bedikah is not enough. Bittul is not enough. You need to do Bedikah and beer chametz. Therefore, you have to search for it and take it out of your jurisdiction as long as it's usher to eat. Now, that's a reason. Question is, what if one of the reasons of the two apply and the other doesn't? So, for example, one of the prohibitions is that you might not really mean that you're nullifying it and making it ownerless. That inner feeling, you don't have it, you want it. What if for some reason that's not a consideration? Either because it's a very minute amount of chametz. There's no real reason to think that you're gonna want to. If it's thousands of dollars, that's a reason to be concerned. But if it's a small little piece of bread, how afraid do we have to be that person is going to want that piece of bread? It's probably not going to even be good when Pesach is over, but it's still a piece of bread. So about eating that, we're going to be concerned. So most people, if you continue reading the Alter Rebbe, when he brings down this halacha, he brings it down again a number of times. Most of the time, he doesn't mention the first reason, which is that we're afraid the person won't be sincere in their bittul. He just mentions the second reason, and it seems like that's the main reason, even though you would think that But my obvious question is, usually when you say two things, the first one is more significant, the second one is less so. So why would he say the second one, the more important reason, last? The answer is probably because he's quoting the Raan, basically. So because he's quoting the Raan, you could say he's kind of following the Raan's order, even though he doesn't necessarily feel that the significance of the first is more than the second. And the Raan holds the same thing, that the second is more of a concern. Okay, so that was a teaching about bittul and hefker, and why it's not enough. Now we're going to come to the Or HaNer. This is a machlokas between the Raan and other Rishonim. And in this instance, the Raan, I don't think is in the majority. I don't think the authors of the Shulchan Aruch and the Beis Yosef and the Ramah, and definitely the Alter Rebbe argues on the Raan, even though they came later, but they were in agreement with earlier Rishonim that argued on the Raan. What's the argument? The argument is as follows. The Gemara says as follows. How do we know that when it comes time to look for chametz, you got to look at night? Okay. Why don't you look during the day? Does anybody know why we don't look during the day? There's two reasons. But the main reason, the relevant reason for now, is that it needs to be l'or haner. It needs to be to candlelight, and candlelight really only works at night, doesn't work properly during the day. Why does it have to be candlelight? So on this, there's a Gemara that says that there's a verse that says, Ne'asher nishmas adam, chofish kol chader batem. I actually want to look up this Gemara. It says the following. Beautiful verse in Sefania. At that time, I'm going to search out Jerusalem, Yerushalayim, with candles. Now, Yud Aleph, the main handout, and the bigger handout.
Just like today, for example, we use candles, but between me and you, some flashlights are 10 times more powerful.
And you should use mostly. But Moshe says you should start it with a candle, and then to have not just a safer Bedikah, but a better Bedikah, so you could go in without fear of burning the house. You'll be able to do more effective Bedikah with a flashlight. Start with a candle, do a little bit with a candle in the safe areas, the big areas. Once you start going into closets, once you start going under beds, under tables, looking into bookshelves, lose the candle. You're going to have the candle burning in a safe place on some metal. What? The candle is very important, but it gets in the way of looking in your closet. You're not going to do. A, you could burn down your house. B, you're probably not doing a good job at the Bedikah because you have so many flammable things that you're probably not going to do a good Bedikah. So Moshe says mostly flashlight. You start with a candle, do what you can, the easy stuff with a candle. Once you get into anything that is anyway flammable, or even if it's not flammable, but the candle is not as effective as the flashlight, use the flashlight. And there's diyukim in the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch to show you that he probably, they didn't have flashlights, so we don't know what he would have said. It's very speculative. But
this is a typical example of years ago they only had candles.
Correct.
Today technology makes things better. So
but let's talk a little bit before we jump to the right now. Of course, we know flashlight's better, but is there any? So why do we even still need to start with a candle? Maybe we should just skip the candle. Start with a flashlight, and the answer is we start with a candle. Why? It's to respect this Gemara that quotes these two different pasukim. One pasuk I just read to you. The other pasuk is saying, Zion, Shamdaf Zion, Seif Ahmed Beis. Let me look that up over here. The light of God is a human being's soul. Wow. Heavy stuff. Okay, there's some other verses that the Gemara goes through here that I'm leaving out. So if you're interested in looking them up, you could look them up in Pesachim Daf Zayin and Beis. And I'm going to share a very interesting Ishbitzer teaching with you. It says, it says, at that time, I'll look out, I'll search Jerusalem with candles. And then it says, who searches the inner recesses of a human being. So the Gemara explains, the suit is Nahara, Tfei, Davin Rabbi Meshach, let me explain to you. I'm not going to translate that to you. I'm going to explain how the Ishbitzer explains it. Beautiful teaching. It says the following. The Gemara is saying like this. Maybe there's a leniency when God only uses a candle to look for whatever he's looking for in Yerushalayim. What is he looking for in Yerushalayim? He's looking for our sins. So why is it better for him to use a candle than a torch? Because he won't see all our sins because he doesn't have a big light. He has a small light. So maybe I would think that when it comes to ourselves looking for our own chametz, we should use a torch. It comes to teach you, even when it comes to looking into your own soul, use a candle, which is the soul is God's candle. Here's what Ishbitzer says, beautiful teaching. So everybody knows that when God is looking at us, we don't really want God to look too closely because he's going to find stuff, So God, just look, but just don't analyze too much. But when it comes to our own awareness of our own faults, maybe we should really hold ourselves up to not a candle, but to a flame, to a torch. We should really analyze every wrongdoing to be honest with ourselves. Right? Wrong. Ishbitzer says, even when you're looking at yourself, don't be too medactic. Don't be too self-conscious of every possible little flaw. Don't hold yourself under a microscope. Forget about asking God not to hold you under a microscope. Don't hold yourself under a microscope. Because if you are, you're going to find problems. If you find problems, you're going to get depressed. So the Ishbitzer teaching is like you should know yourself, but not too well. You hear? You want to become more aware of yourself so that you're not a bore. You're not like an animal. You learn how to become a better person. But if you're going to demand perfection of yourself, that's why, by the way, sometimes I read the Balei Musar and they demand the perfection of like their closest Talmidim and their children. And their children probably couldn't talk to them.
That's why we like this.
Yeah, that's what we like the Ishbitzer. So the Ishbitzer is saying, look, but not too deeply at your own faults, because it's too much to bear. Okay, let's continue. The bottom line is, we don't check during the day, and
If you're not able to check at night, are you then allowed to check?
if you're not able to check at night, then you check during the day. You do the same thing. You use the candle, use the flashlight. Today we have a lot of windows, we have electric lights, so it's probably a much easier to check during. Yes, if it's relevant to what we're doing. Yeah.
Is 8 times a night. I am, and Daddy.
Okay, good, good. So who is this? Ishbitzer Chassid told you this. Okay, very nice. It's like a new age stuff. It goes very well with Ishbitzer. I am who I am, and that is enough. Okay. Baruch Hashem.
But it isn't enough.
Yeah, not for the rest of the world. Okay, so we're going to continue now. Why? So I mentioned before that these psukim constitute a Deorayta? The Raan says yes, that there's a biblical requirement to use a candle and not the sunlight, maybe not even the electric light. It has to be a candle because those psukim are on the level of Deorayta. And like I said, the Rishonim and Achronim, including the Alter Rebbe, do not agree with the Raan on that. It's very interesting because, first of all, usually a Deorayta, biblical, for something to be biblical, it's not usually a verse in Tzefanya, or in these most of these verses are in Tzefanya initially. They're not biblical. They're biblical, but not the biblical of the 5 books of Moshe. That's one issue. Also, to get to that, it's very roundabout. It's like, really, we should check the 14th during the day, but people will forget. It's a whole like roundabout thing. If it was just, hey, we're biblically required to check at night, you wouldn't have this lead up, this whole yeah. No, I don't think it's any more than that. I think that's I think it's the Raan L'Shitaso that says that there's which the Alter Rebbe holds of some part of this, which is there's 2 potential ways of dealing with chametz. There's the biblical way. If you don't do the bittul, that you need to do the Bedikah, and the Bedikah needs to be done a certain way, and then you need to get rid of it. Or alternatively, you could do the bittul, and then the rabbis come and say you need to do both. Okay. So that's just a machlokas between the Raan and many others. Now we continue with another Raan who quotes the Ravid. The Raan says the following thing. Why does it say L'or Haner and not, I'm sorry, why does it say Or L'Arba Asar, the light of the 14th, L'Or Haner? Why doesn't it just say Leil Arba Asar, the night of the 14th? Now the Gemara has a reason. It's to tell you the importance of positive speech. Okay. But the Ravid doesn't trust that the Gemara is enough. And the Ravid adds that it must be that Or L'Arba Asar means the beginning of the night, when there's still a little bit of light at the night. Because when it's like Seta Kochavim, when the stars come up, right in the beginning, when stars come up, you'll still see, if you look at the western horizon, it's still a little lit. It's not like light like when the sun is still out or when it just set. But there's a difference between the west and the east. If you look at the east, it's going to be completely dark. And you look at the west, it's not completely dark. So comes the Ravid, and the Raan likes it. The Raan says, quotes the Ravid and says, I agree with him, that Or L'Arba Asar means right in the beginning of the night, even though 3 stars are out, but it's still lit on the western side of it, still light. Now here, the Alter Rebbe, not only does he like the Raan and the Ravid and quotes them, he says, I agree with them, but he says, he tries to kind of say that the other rabbis, even the ones who don't really agree, he tries to get them on the same page, which is that it's got to be done right away when it gets dark. He pushes very hard to find a way where, even though he recognizes there's 2 opinions, he doesn't let the second opinion really make a difference in terms of the application of when you need to look for the chametz. Let's see if I could find that inside to read a little bit for you. That would be the end of Tuf Lamed Aleph. I'll just mention a couple things here along the way. If you look in Halacha Hey, in the middle. In the top of Yud Aleph, top of this page, right? Mikan Samcha Chachamim She'ara Anei Yafel Bedikah. From the verses we just quoted, the rabbis, I'm on Yud Aleph on the top. The rabbis relied on the light of the candle being Yafel Bedikah, meaning what? It's not the Torah, it's not the Oraisa, it's rabbinic. So he's arguing very clearly on the Raan. Like I said before, and candlelight doesn't really work so good at day. And it says, really, you should just come home the night of the 14th, the night before Pesach, and check right away as soon as you get home, even if it's still light out, like it's going to be this year. But because the light doesn't really, the candle doesn't really work properly when it's still day out, you got to wait till night. But if the parentheses is correct, it's exactly like the Raan and the Ravid. When there's still, it's Tzeitzah Chachavim, but when the early side of Tzeitzah Chachavim, not the later Tzeitzah Chachavim, which, by the way, there's a big machloket. When is Tzeitzah Chachavim? There's the Rabbeinu Tam. That's a much later time. So clearly, he's saying this is not a time for following Rabbeinu Tam. It's got to be the beginning of Tzeitzah Chachavim, the earlier version of Tzeitzah Chachavim, where there's still a little bit of or of the day left. Now, that in between time from when you get home till Tzeitzah Chachavim, till when the three stars come out, which is, let's say, a half hour. You can't eat. So you got a half hour before the time of the Bedikah, not a time for dinner. You want to eat dinner? Just eat it before that. The little one, you can't learn. Afilu Perek. Next page. I skipped a page because it's only a couple lines. Even just a little bit, because we're worried that you'll get involved in your learning, you'll get caught up in it until quite a bit of time after Tzeit. All of the things that you're not allowed to do before Mincha time, or Tfilas Arbis, Shishbar, if you forgot to check at the night, in the daytime as well, you're forbidden for all these things until you check. It's so stringent that even if you were doing one of these things, you're eating, let's say, you're learning one of the things, as soon as the time it says comes that you could check, you have to interrupt what you're doing, which is a chumrah that we don't find by other mitzvot necessarily, that as soon as the time of, let's say, davening mincha comes, if you started eating before, you finish the meal. There's a whole machlokus on Shabbos. If you're eating before Shabbos, if Shabbos comes, can you finish the meal or not? It's a conversation. It's a machlokus. Because if you don't have a hefsek, you're being mevatel to kalas chacham shetiknu livdek b'tzitzak chacham miyad k'sheshadayin or a yom ksat. you're again nullifying a takana of the rabbis, because the institution of checking is right away when Seit HaKochavim starts. Now the question is he passing like the Raan of the Ravid? Because not everyone agrees with the Raan of the Ravid. That has to be still Arayom. And if you look in his Kuntras Achron, he says even though not everyone agrees with the Raan of the Ravid, they don't all share that sentiment. He holds that they still all agree that you can't do anything then, even a half hour before. And by the way, not everyone agrees. There's some people.
What's the author of the sheet? Word says or it says Mamish? I've heard people say the author of the could do based on reports.
Yeah, well, it's not so pasha, but it's not really going to help us in this sugya here. Yeah, it's a big nafkamina, but right here it's a standalone thing. He still says says, but he says the early side of says. So then he asks about some big questions about what if you didn't even say Kriya Shema? You should first do the Bedikah before the Kriya Shema. He's somewhat mechadish. I don't know if he's the first one to say it. And he's consistently showing us that there has to be something special about the beginning time of the Bedikah, because he says there is no real end time. I mean, the real end time would be, I'd think, the morning, but he doesn't hold like that. He says there's no end time because they're only is to the beginning time. The end time is any time. You have to check the next day. You have to check on Pesach. You have to check on Chol Moed Pesach. You have to check even after Pesach, so that you don't come to whatever you to come to eat it. So he says there's no end time of when you have to finish the Bedikah by. There's only a beginning time, and that will explain partially why the bracha al bir chametz is made on the Bedikah, because there's a beginning of when you do that. The beer itself, the actual beer, that happens in different stages. It happens somewhat at night, some a little more during the day. It doesn't have a set beginning time, and even though it has an end time for the beer, that's actually a machlokus that the Alter Rebbe believes was not resolved yet. Meaning, either at the end of the 5th hour or the 6th hour of the morning, like an hour before noon, when the halachic noon is, could be burnt an hour before or burnt in the beginning of that last hour. That itself is a machlokus. But because there's a machlokus, there's no real clarity on when beer chametz ends, only when it begins. And even he's going to say something very interesting, is that time is sometimes more, when something starts without an ending, that start is more powerful than even if later on there'll be a stronger obligation. Let's say during the day, as it gets closer to midday, there's more of a biblical obligation, either rabbinic and then eventually biblical, to get rid of the chametz. The night before, he doesn't agree with the Raan that you have to look with R Deorayta. But what he is kind of instead leans into is this idea of the takanas chacham, that it has to be at this time. This is the beginning time. There is no end time, really. So the beginning time becomes when you have to make the bracha. It becomes when you can't be mevatel, you can't get involved in any other work. Okay. Now we continue with the next thing, which is the brachas that we were just talking about. So Taf Lamed Beis. We'll turn a couple pages here. One page actually, to be exact. Taf Lamed Beis. Din birchas b'dikas chametz about Yud Beis Seifim. The bottom of the page. That's about. Kodim sheyaschil live the ksach levarach k'moshe mevarach al kol mitzvos medivrei soifrim. Before you do the Bedikah, you have to make a bracha like you make a bracha on any mitzvah that's from the rabbis. Question is, what do you mean? Doesn't Rashi say that Orla Arbasa Bedikah Chametz? Now the first Rashi on the Masechtas Pesachim says You shouldn't be violating Bal Yar Bal Matzah. Even the Alter Rebbe doesn't agree with that. It says that because we're doing bittul, maybe Rashi doesn't agree with himself either, according to the Raan. Rashi's saying, in theory, if you don't do bittul, you need to do Bedikah and beer. That's how the Raan explains Rashi. We did it last week. Here, he's saying it's rabbinic. It's rabbinic. But you make a bracha on rabbinic. Do you make a bracha on lighting a menorah? Do you make a bracha on lighting Shabbos candles? Do you make a bracha on Megillah? Yeah, they're all rabbinic. You still make a bracha. Al bir chametz. That's the bracha. Bir chametz is to get rid of the chametz. But you're not getting rid of it. You're just looking for it. You're going to burn it the next day. So, since what do you do as soon as you finish checking for the chametz, the night of the 14th? You do the bittul. Now, the Alter Rebbe is going to explain that even though you do the bittul again during the day, in the morning, that's not the real bittul. The real takana on the time of the Gemara was to do the bittul at night. That's a latter add-on to also do a bittul during the day, but it's not, because again, there's no set time during the day to do, and you're busy during the day. So timing is essential. Like I'll tell you, you know who you're going to find as a wife, the perfect wife for you, or the woman who, in her desperate hour, will take you. The second, the latter. That's going to be better than you could ever get on your own, because its timing is everything. Meaning, if you're waiting around and you're not using timing, you're never going to get anywhere in life. You got to use the timing. So, because even though it's only rabbinic, but this is the time to do it, that's when you make the bracha. Even though you're not really. But the main mitzvah, you're not even doing the main mitzvah. Well, you're going to do the main mitzvah after this, which is the bittul. And the bittul is also beer, right? That's also Rashi. Rashi says when you're mavatul the chametz, that's already sivaru, is tevatlin, like the Targum Unkel says. Okay. Next page. Shenishar bir shusai, the Beisai, the science. Alright, bittul zanikar beer. That bittul is called beer. Okay, like I said, that's Rashi. That's the law when about chametz. You don't know the bittul. But the known chametz you're putting aside in the safe place. You only have two things of chametz: either what you're going to burn, or what you're going to have for breakfast. And you know where it is. And the next day you're going to burn it all after breakfast, whatever's left. And whatever you took, the 10 pieces that you found in the Bedikah, you don't make a bracha again. You don't make a bracha when you're burning it. You don't make a bracha when you do the bittul. Because they're already covered by the bracha. Like when you put on the talis, you make one bracha for the putting on the talis. You don't keep making a bracha every 5 minutes. I'm still wearing talis. No, you do. The Bedikah starts. The tachlis of the Bedikah is the beer, the bittul and the beer. So it's all covered by the first bracha. The kochamira is all covered. It's the Bedikah is l'tzarech the bittul and l'tzarech the beer. So it's all part of the same thing. Again, the importance of timing. Beginning, the haschal, kol haschal is kashus, but you have the right time. It's going to all work from there. And then here's a good question. I'm sorry. Halacha base. Why don't you make a bracha on a bedikah? Why do we make al beer? He said because the bedikah is not the purpose; it's a means to an end. Let's say you checked, but you didn't get rid of it. Shematza Bedikah. You didn't do anything. I checked it. I found it here. It's on the table all Pesach. It's still there. Or you didn't do the bittul after the Bedikah. You didn't complete the mitzvah. Why don't you make a shachiyanu? Who mitzvah abam mizman lisman? It only comes occasionally. It's like a yearly mitzvah that would qualify as a shachiyanu. Because its purpose is for the sake of the holiday, the Pesach. Yeah, to fix up the house and to get rid of chametz. Now, what's the question? L'sakan abayis. It's very interesting. It's a cycle. There's no tikkun bias. You're not fixing the house. You're not putting in lighting fixtures. You're not putting in shelving. You're not putting down a new floor. But so what is he saying? L'sakan abayis. Because you can't have a nice Pesach when you are aware that the house wasn't clean. So I think it's the psychology of the tikkun of that. And then he adds in and get rid of the chametz. It's the ikachasim nasefer. The main thing is the bir chametz. Why is he saying l'sakan abayis? The answer is because it's litzarach. I'm going to say something, and I'm going to end with the Ishbitzer. Who eats matzah on Pesach? Do women have to eat matzah on Pesach? Yes. Why? Because whoever is forbidden on eating chametz, that's who has to eat matzah for the Seder. There's a relationship between having the positive, which is the matzah, which is the Seder, and not having the negative, which is not having chametz in the house, and definitely not eating it. What does that really mean? Comes to Ishbitzer and explains the following. Most people think when you do a mitzvah, you do a mitzvah. Great. Not the Ishbitzer. The Ishbitzer thinks when you do a mitzvah, what part of your body are you using to do the mitzvah? Using your hand, let's say, to shake a little bit. So therefore, you have to think about, what am I taking with my hand? Am I taking things that are mine, or am I stealing? Or am I borrowing and not giving back? Things like that. So therefore, in order to really get the lulav, l'kachnan l'chen, to take it for yourself on Sukkot, you need to dig a little bit. We said not too deeply, but a little bit into your relationship with with your economic kashrut, so to speak. So the same thing would be about chametz. What's chametz? Chametz, we know, is the Yetzer Hara or the ego. So if you want to be able to have matzah, which is like michla de menusa, it's food that gives you emunah, gives you a relationship with God, and also gives you a sense of awe, awesomeness, and so on. If you want to be able to access that, it's only commensurate to your getting rid of the chametz in your life, getting rid of the Yetzer Hara, getting rid of the bloated sense of ego, a sense of self. So in that sense, it's really, in order to eat matzah, you can't have chametz. So the bedikah is really l'tzarech the yantiv. So you're going to make a shachiyanu on the yantiv. You're going to make a shachiyanu on the positive thing. The negative thing is in relationship with the positive thing. That's why it's almost a Kabbalistic thing, l'saken habayis, to do a tikkun. Anyway, any questions? Yes.
She made an example. Source of blessing will be you.